joining us. But in the meantime, let me go ahead and kick things off. So do you want to start the recording, Linz?
Already did.
All right, very good. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Tonight, we're going to be doing the fourth in the series of workshops for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, and it's all about preparing your financial projections. So I want to, let's see. First, I want to just remind everybody, we do record these sessions so that we can share them back out to a broader audience of other people who aren't able to attend. And I also want to just point out that I'm going to show you some slides tonight that have financials on them. These are from some past companies and participants in the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. The numbers are just for pure representation only. In fact, we've even gone in and changed some of them around to make a point. So they're not necessarily accurate, but they're just to be used in order to give you some examples. Also, I want to remind everybody who's on the workshop, if you haven't registered yet, please register using the QR code. And this is just to let us know that you intend to apply or submit to the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. You're not obligated to do that if you do register, but by registering, you're going to get access to our shared resources folder. And in it are all those little goodies that are down by that folder: templates, examples of submissions, tips, the workshop video recording links, the slide decks that I'm using each week for these presentations, scoring rubrics, etc. So please do that. And in particular, I wanted to highlight to you tonight that I created in that folder a separate folder specifically for preparing your financial projections. And these are the documents that are in there. So there are two examples. This one right here is about revenue forecasting examples, and it shows 4 different ways, depending upon your business type, that you can set up a spreadsheet to forecast the revenue. This one down here, expenses template, is a template that's set up to do the other part of what you typically would see in an income statement or a P&L, and that's forecasting all of your expenses for your business. All right, first and foremost, I would point you to this document, which is Read Me First, Financial Projections. In there, there's a lot of really good information, and it will walk you through and explain what each of these documents in this folder should be used for. There's also some links to some other really helpful videos that you might want to watch that will help you better understand financial projection and financial modeling. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. You get access to this by registering back here. So please make sure that you do register and you're on our radar, and we can share this resource folder with you. All right, on for the show. So tonight's workshop is all about preparing financial projections. So let's start with what are the things related to financials that you're going to need to cover as part of your submission for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. And this is something that gets a little confusing, all right? So there's 3 different types of requirements for financials. The first one is you're going to submit a 3-year income statement or P&L. And this has to be a detailed statement, and it includes the assumptions that you used to help develop these projections. The second thing is you're going to have typically 1 slide, and that would be in your pitch deck that's going to summarize your income statement. All right, so it's a summarized version of that 3-year projection. The third piece is you should have a section in your executive summary, and the executive summary is one of the other documents you have to submit. In there, you're going to have a section on financials. And in that section, you're going to want to summarize the key points. What are the key takeaways from that 3-year income statement that you would want to highlight to an investor? You're going to want to briefly describe, well, what is your revenue model? And if you know what your profit margins are or what you expect them to be, you're going to want to highlight that, and any other key indicators that you think are positive for your business. Then you're also going to want to show the resources that you have So what funding do you have today? And I realize many of you on the call today might not have any funding at all, and that's okay. In that case, you're going to want to show the funding that you hope to have at the end of the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. All right. And then you're also going to want to show what we call the uses. So given that you have an assumption of some funding or that you'll be receiving some funding, how do you plan to use that money? All right. Investors are going to want to know that. And then if you can, highlight any costs to launch your business and any other major financial assumptions that you would want to highlight to prospective investors. All right. Okay, so for tonight's agenda, what I'm planning to cover, and I'm planning to go pretty fast, please feel free to ask questions in the chat, raise your hand, or just speak up and feel free to interrupt me if you have a question and you think I'm going to blow by. But tonight I want to cover, what is a P&L and why have a P&L, the basic income statement formats, how you're going to tie your assumptions to the data you're going to be projecting, how you can use your financial statement to test your business concept, and then where do you get started? How do you go about developing that year 1 projection, and then those follow-on year 2 and year 3 projections? And then also, how are you going to present this financial information, all of this information, and distill it down to one slide to show in your pitch deck? And then we'll talk a little bit about this use of funds at the very end. All right. So Lindsay, if you could launch the poll. So we're going to start off, kick things off by doing a quick poll. Did it launch? Oh, there we are. Okay. So simple one to get started. If you could just take a quick minute, complete that. All right, hopefully everybody's done. Is everybody done, Linz? Can you tell how many have submitted?
There's 2 missing, which...
Well, I did one. All right, when you have the results, go ahead, feel free to share them. Okay, so pretty good. Most people know what a P&L is, okay, or what an income statement is. And most people have never prepared one. So, okay, that's about average, pretty typical of what these workshops, of the people attending these workshops. So good. So this workshop is going to be very basic for some of you. And for others, it's going to be a whole lot of new terms and concepts that you may never have heard before, but hopefully will help you get a basic understanding. And then you can always come back for more help from me or by connecting to other mentors on Startup Tree to ask your specific questions. But please don't ever feel like you don't have any place to go to get help when it comes to preparing your financial statements, all right? We have resources that can help you and help you work through this. All right, so let's get started. All right, so a P&L stands for profit and loss statement, and sometimes you'll hear people call it a P&L, sometimes you'll hear people call it an income statement, and other times you'll hear people refer to it as an operating statement or statement of operations, all right? So it's got 3 different names, but they all refer to the same document. And the P&L is just one of 3 key financial documents that every company is expected to have. And in fact, we used to require in the Be Your Own Boss Bowl that you did all 3 statements as part of your submission. We found that for a lot of the people, first timers, really not having any kind of a business background, that was pretty challenging. And so we've just narrowed it down to focus on the profit and loss statement, because that is the one that will give you the most information and help you get the furthest along. All right. So Basically, the P&L is going to show you, how much money your business has earned and or lost, okay, and within a specific period of time. Now, for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, this 3-year projection that we're asking for should be 1 year by month, and then a summary total of that first year, those first 12 months. And then year 2 and year 3 should be by quarter. So you can summarize it by quarter. So you'd have Q1, 2, 3, and 4, and then a year 2 total, and then Q1, 2, 3, and 4, and a year 3 total. All right. So you're basically submitting for your financial projections an Excel spreadsheet that's got 3 years of data, and it's going to be year 1, 2, and 3, first year 12 months, second 2 years in quarterly statements. Okay. As you can see, this one right here, pretty basic. This is for like a small lemonade stand. Okay. Notice it's only showing 3 months of data, but you'll get a good feel because income statements all follow a similar format. They're all a little different, but they're all very similar. So you usually start with sales or revenue at the top, and then you total that. And in this case, there's 2 different products that they're selling here. So they've got 2 line items and then the total. Then cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold refers to all of those costs directly related to what you are selling in terms of either a product or a service. And then you would total that. If you subtract those costs for the products or services from what you took in terms of revenue, that gives you a gross profit number. That's a good start to let you know whether or not you're going to make any money selling the product you've sold before you consider all of your other business expenses. All right. If you're negative at this point, you have a big problem. All right. So that's one test you can look for. Now you jump down below and you can see SG&A. SG&A stands for sales or selling, general, and administrative expenses. That's what the SG&A acronym stands for. And in there, this business, because it's small, right, it only has 2 line items in there. But there are many, many businesses that they might have 100 line items in there. They're all different because it all depends on your business. All right. So you total all of your expenses, you subtract that from your gross profit. And now you're looking at, did I make any profit, any income after all of my expenses, both to produce the product and to run my business? And in the end, that's whether or not you're in the black or in the red, as they say, whether or not your business is positive or negative in terms of profit. Okay, so anybody want to tell me why they think it's important to have a P&L? What are some reasons why you need to have a P&L for a business? Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew, you had your hand up.
I had a question first.
Yep, go ahead.
The cost of goods sold, that's just like how much the materials cost for the item, and then the SG&A expenses are like administrative costs and marketing, that sort of thing?
Yes.
What does the SG&A stand for?
It stands for selling, general, and administrative expenses. So all expenses related to selling, any expenses that might be just considered general, like rent, utilities, any leases you may have, and administrative would apply to things like salaries, medical benefits, 401k plans, which not many startups have, things like that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So why have a P&L? Why? Oh, Yvette, go ahead.
I was going to say taxes.
You mean for tax? You need to have a P&L for taxes?
For tax purposes. For tax purposes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and why? So why taxes? How are taxes influenced by this?
You have to pay tax on whatever you made, on your income, the income that you made.
Right. Well,
right?
You pay taxes on your profit.
Okay.
Okay. You don't pay taxes
right.
on your You don't pay taxes like on your revenue or your sales. You're going to pay taxes
I
on
was saying
your,
the net income, right?
yeah, net income, right? You're on your profit. Okay.
Okay. Mhm.
Aiden, how about you?
Compiling all the information that's in the P&L, like at the end of a period, you could get a good view of if an expense was too large or out of control. You could make some tweaks to it because you have all that information in front of you.
Okay. All right. So it allows you to reflect on what you've done and potentially change course, make changes in what you're planning to do. All right. That's really good. Anybody else? Any other reasons? All right. Well, so I'm going to give you a run through some just high level ones, right? So typically you do a P&L for two purposes. One is to report or as Aiden just said, kind of reflect on what results did you have for a period of time. All right. And, you can have a P&L that's run every month and then summarized by quarter. You almost always have a P&L on an annual basis, either at the end of the calendar year or at the end of the fiscal year, depends on how you operate your business. But you also use P&Ls for the purposes of projecting, of being able to do your projections. And that's really what you should be focused on in terms of the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. Unless your business has been up and running for a period of time, okay, you're really looking towards the future. And so your P&L is really going to be more of a projection tool than a reporting results tool. All right. Let me see the question in the chat. Yes, our recordings are made available on our YouTube channel. Okay. And the slide deck from today is also shared in that shared resources folder. So again, make sure you register so that you can get access to that. All right, back to the questions. All right, you also are going to want to ask questions. If you're running this business, right, you're going to need to know, well, how much revenue are we bringing in? And where are my costs coming from? And of course, like, am I profitable from month to month to month? And you couldn't know that unless you were putting together this at least monthly or quarterly statement that would allow you to track revenue, dollars coming in, dollars going out in terms of your expenses, and then ultimately, am I making money or am I losing money, right? So as a business owner, you want that information to track, to be able to answer those kinds of questions. Also, it's the one way that you can actually sit down, forecast what your business is planning to do, and then look at what kinds of cash do I need? Because one of the biggest reasons that early startups fail is because they run out of cash. And they run out of cash because they didn't do this planning to determine how much cash they were going to need. They burned through what they had and then didn't have enough time, enough of a window to go raise more funds in order to keep the business going, or to take corrective action to reduce their expenses so they could extend their runway. And you're going to hear me talk about this throughout the night. There's this concept called your financial runway. And the runway is having enough cash to keep your business operating before you end up having to close the doors, or before you end up having to bring more money in to help support you. Money in terms of either an investment, so raising more equity financing, or debt financing by going out and getting a loan from a bank or from a wealthy relative. All right. So don't you want to know what the future looks like? By doing these income statements and projecting into the future, you can see whether or not things are getting better or worse based off of your assumptions. And you can look for trends. Okay, that's important. And then, as Aiden pointed out, you're going to want to make sure that you look at those things and you step back and say, well, if we're not making the kind of profit we thought, why? Where are we spending our money? Where could we cut back, or where should we be spending it in different places? All right, not necessarily cutting it back, but just spending it in different places where it'll have more of an impact to help grow the business. So that's just some of the reasons. All right, now the basic components for any income statement really boil down to these. you have revenue coming in, and there's all different kinds of revenue that can come in. It can be through sales of services or products. It could be maintenance agreements or service agreements. It could be through subscriptions, okay? So any way that you are raising revenue, all right, that all gets lumped into that category. Cost of goods sold are all the direct costs related to whatever it is you're selling. Right now, I know some people get very caught up in doing detailed analysis of variable costs and fixed costs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. If you do know what I'm talking about, I would just say that for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, you don't need to do that level of an analysis in order to submit for your, for your application for the competition. All right, we're not looking for that level. Gross profit is just after you subtract your costs directly related to the revenue you're generating. What type of profit are you making? Your operating expenses are all expenses for running the business, not directly related to manufacturing your product or providing your services. It's all of the other expenses, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper in a minute. Your operating profit is the net of those two, taking the expenses off of your gross profit. All right. You'll hear a term called EBITDA. So operating profit and EBITDA are kind of interrelated terms. They mean kind of the same thing. The only difference between operating profit and net income is the EBIT of the EBITDA. And so things like interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, they're really not relevant to a startup. Can anybody tell me why? Why do you think that is? Anybody?
I'm sorry, could you ask the question again? I was writing stuff down.
Sure. So why do you think things like interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization aren't really relevant for most startups? Oh, I'm sorry, lots of hands going up there. Randy, how about you? We haven't heard from you.
Mainly because if you're a startup, you don't really have equipment or too much debt to account for like interest payments, and you don't really need to depreciate equipment if you don't have equipment. Exactly,
because you don't have most of these things. You haven't probably bought a lot of capital equipment, so you don't have anything to depreciate. Because you haven't taken loans out on any of these things, you're not really paying any interest on any of the loans. So yeah, you don't have these expenses for most startups. Now, if you've been in business for a year, it may be a little different. And if you have questions about that, please just come to me. I'm happy to answer your questions on whether you should include it or not include it. Okay. Any other questions about just the basics? This is just the very basic lineup of what's in an income statement. All right. So I want to make a point here, and if you've been on some of my other workshops, you may have heard me say this before, but anybody can make up a set of financial projections, make up a set of numbers and display them as your financial projection, all right? And you can paint a very pretty picture with your numbers, okay? And that's great. But I know, having been a judge for many years and having done mentoring for many years, when I look at financial projections, I look at the numbers, I look at what are the trends in the numbers and some of the key numbers, and then I immediately look for the assumptions. That's it. I just get a quick look at the numbers, what direction they're going, what velocity they're going at, and then I say, okay, that's a nice picture. Let me see what the assumptions are to back up these numbers, to see if the person who is proposing these numbers understands where they're coming from and what were they thinking, how are they going to get to these numbers. That was what's really key. All right, so the numbers alone don't tell the whole story. And when you submit your 3-year financial projection spreadsheet, you should have one tab on that spreadsheet that should be financial assumptions. And on that assumptions page, there's lots of different ways to do this, but one of the ways to do it is just say number 1 and start documenting all of your assumptions. So number 1 might be we're expecting, 5% year-over-year revenue growth. Number 2, we're expecting that revenue growth to come from increase in marketing to new channels. Number 3, and you just need to list out some of those assumptions. Now, the more detailed they are, great. The more you can tie those assumptions back into the numbers, that's great. Okay, but think of it as building your forecast from this set of assumptions. And behind all of the numbers on your spreadsheet, you should have assumptions for almost every category of revenue or expenses that you're showing on that spreadsheet. All right. You can oftentimes footnote these. So if you're putting them in a separate tab, try to create footnotes and then embed them as footnotes or comments into the data. That's helpful for the judges to be able to go back and forth between the 2 sheets. All right. Also, think of your assumptions as a living document. So as you work through these next 5 weeks, preparing to submit to the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, and then beyond that, say you have success in the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, and now you're going to start setting your sights on trying to get meetings with investors eventually. All right. You're going to want to keep your financials and your assumptions up to date. And so this needs to be a living document where you're constantly going in, updating and documenting what your current thinking is about assumptions. So as you're researching competitors, you might find that competitors are spending 6% on marketing and advertising expense, and you were budgeting 15%. And you might want to go, whoa, that's triple almost what they're spending. I need to dial that back a little bit. So even if I spend twice as much money as my competitors on my marketing and advertising, that might be enough, right? Now, spending less money in that area is obviously going to improve your bottom line in terms of that money you haven't spent goes to the bottom line, but it's allowing you to, as you learn things about the industry, about your competitors, go in and update those assumptions. All right. Look at other businesses in your industry to see what they're doing, and look at other similar businesses in other industries to see what kinds of insights you can get about assumptions that they're using. And the one I just gave was a good example of, looking at what maybe the spend is from some of your competitors in certain areas of their business. Now, if they're private companies, that info is not easy to get, but you can actually find some of this information out. And again, Adam Shambaugh over at the Business Library is a great person, a great resource to go to help you identify how to do that kind of a research. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what assumptions are you making about your business. So does anybody want to share and give me an example of maybe an assumption or a couple assumptions as they relate to your financial projections? And let's just talk a little bit about what might be pertinent and how many of them may be common to all of you, in fact.
So yeah, I could give you an example on the assumptions, and it goes to like I was wondering like how in depth it needs to be, kind of. So I was thinking of using like for example, Firebase as my database, and they provide all sorts of pricing models. So for if this many users are going on your website, how much does it cost per user versus how much does it cost per database access point? And I could do like math for, okay, if I have 1,000 users, then I assume they're making 15 database reads, then the price of that would be X. But it seems a little bit too in depth. Like I start going down that and it's like, it's going to take me a while just to go through this thing. Maybe should I be focusing on other areas? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I would say you don't necessarily want to dive into the weeds right away, okay? And part of that is it depends on how relevant is that expense? If you're telling me that what was it again? Fire?
It was the Firebase database. It's like
Okay.
a backend.
Right. So of all of your projected expenses, is Firebase, more than 25% of your costs?
No, it's pretty cheap.
Right. So then you don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it won't make much difference, right? Don't spend all your time calculating, calculating an expense that's maybe 2% of all your total expenses, and don't spend 60% of your time trying to figure that out. Make an assumption about that. Like you might say, hey, year one, I'm going to get this many users, this many data calls, and I'm going to buy this plan, and that's good enough. And I'm going to use that plan for year one. End of year one, my growth rates are showing, more subscribers. That's going to be more data hits. So guess what? I'm going to jump up to the next plan. My costs for Firebase are going to jump up to the next level for year two. It's pretty, it's that quick. You can reason it through that quick. And you don't have to document to that level for an expense that's that small. Now, if Firebase, if you told me, hey, Greg, this is integral to my business model, and it represents 25 or 30% of my total expense for my business, then yeah, spend a little more time on it and document it, because it'll be significant and people want to make sure that you have a good projection for that. That's a good question. You can use the 80-20 rule here. Okay, Pareto's principle of 80% of the effect is going to come from 20% of the sample size, right? So if 80% of the expenses are coming from 20% of the items in your budget, focus on those 20% of those items and make sure you've got really good solid assumptions on those, because they're the ones people will probably challenge. What other kinds of assumptions do we want to be thinking about? Okay, so how many of you have businesses based off of subscribers? Show of hands. Anybody? Nobody has apps. Okay, so one. Okay, a couple. All right, so you're going to be wanting to document what's the growth in subscribers based off of, right? So you're going to have assumptions on, I'm going to start with this many subscribers. I got that many subscribers based off of this level of marketing and advertising using these kinds of channels, right? But if your subscriptions jump from one period to the next period by 50%, 100%, 200%, that's a big jump. And somebody's going to want to know why. And if you use kind of a blanket answer of, whoa, that's because of I'm using social media or I'm using word of mouth, that's, a 200% increase in subscribers based off of word of mouth. I don't know that I'd have a lot of confidence in that answer. So I would want to see, well, what are your assumptions? How are you getting that 200% growth? Okay. Another one is, so how many of you are planning to have, multiple people in your business, either multiple founders or employees? Anybody? Okay, a couple. All right. So you're going to need to have an assumption of, when are you hiring people? And why are you hiring people? And what kind of people are you hiring? Meaning, like, at what level, what job position? And what are you paying those people, right? So they're all assumptions. If the salary line, okay, you're gonna have a salary line. If the salary line in your spreadsheet is showing a flat level, and then all of a sudden, boop, it goes up, and then it's flat again for another 6 months, and then boop, it goes up again, right? You should have that documented. And one way to document that is putting it in the assumptions, saying, I plan to hire this person in Q3 at this salary, this person in Q5, or not Q5, sorry, Q4 at this salary, this person in year 2, Q2 at this salary. And at least then when people see that salary line bumping up, they can go to the assumptions and they can see, oh, so I get it. The reason salaries are going up is because they're hiring a salesperson and they're adding another marketing person. And now they're adding a customer service person. And it makes sense. It also shows you've thought it through. Okay. So there's some examples of the kinds of assumptions that you should be thinking about. All right. At this point, I want to show you something else. So that's it. Okay. All right. So I want to show you this spreadsheet. This is a little bit more detail. And again, it's not necessarily in the exact format of, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it is actually. It is in the format of what you'd need to do for Be Your Own Boss Bowl. So it's January, February, March. I put in a Q1 total, but you wouldn't have to. And then April, May, June, and then a Q2 total, et cetera, Q3. Sorry, I goofed that up there. I'll fix that. And then you can see that's total for year 1. Then in year 2, you have Q1, Q2, 3, Q4, a year 2 total, a year 3 total. But over here is what I wanted to show you. So you're going to have in the income statement, you always start with revenue. You may have line items for services and products. If you're a service-only business, you're going to just have a line item for services, and you may have multiple types of services. You may also, or I'll leave it at that, okay? And then you always total your revenue. Then down in here, they have miscellaneous blanket interest. I'm going to skip that for now, but then you're going to get into expenses, all right? So in this case, direct cost of goods sold, the materials for the product you made, any rental that you may be paying on equipment that you needed to use to make that product, okay? Now also, in here, there's things like, salaries, okay? In this case, salary for the owner, but if you had multiple people, you could lump it all into this one line. You could break it out in detail. It depends, it's up to you. Other wages, okay? Pension expenses, workers' comp, G&A down in here related to general and accounting legal fees, advertising and promotion, bank charges, all of that type of stuff. Insurance expense. Most of you, some of you should be really thinking about what kind of insurance you'll need on your business. And then if you have a physical presence, do you have to rent an office and pay utilities? Are you going to have phone costs, et cetera? All right, things like that. And then down here, net income. Now, the point I wanted to make is that under expenses, you can have 10 things listed. If you remember, the lemonade stand only had a couple things listed, I think selling and advertising. But you could have 50 or 100 categories. And what I would say to you is it's going to be however many you need. So one of the things you're going to want to do is start off by just thinking, what are all the expenses I'm going to incur in running this business? And just make a shopping list of all the possible expenses that you think you may have. Things like shipping, postage. A lot of these might be like shipping might be significant for your business, depending upon what it is. Things like postage is probably pretty insignificant and could get lumped into a miscellaneous category. All right, so don't go crazy. All right, we don't want to know that you're budgeting $10 a month for postage. That's way too detailed for a really small number. Those kinds of things can be lumped in, and we don't need to see that. All right, so I want to go back over to this. And I want to talk a little bit about testing the business concept. All right, so this is a question that comes up every year, and that's people say, well, if I win the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, like, how should I show that? And what should I show? Should I show that I'm going to win like 4th place and $5,000? And the answer is no, because why would you be shooting for fourth place? You want to shoot for grand prize. So it's okay to make an assumption that you're going to have $60,000 in cash to start your business because you're going to win the Be Your Own Boss Ball. That's okay, right? Every one of you should be looking at that and including that. Now, if you've got a $5,000 bank account that you're going to put towards this, if you've got an aunt, an uncle, any other relatives that are willing to put cash into your business, put that into your projection, whatever you think your starting number is. And it's also, it's okay if it's zero, right? If you're, regardless of your circumstances, if you have no real cash to put into this business yet, that's okay. Start with that $60,000 assumption of the Be Your Own Boss Ball, all right? All right, the next question that I get asked is, so what happens if I don't have any revenue for year one? Guess what? That's okay too, because most startups don't generate any revenue. And if they do, they don't generate much in year one. All right, so it's okay for year one to show $0 in revenue unless you've already launched your business or unless you're ready to launch your business, any day now. All right, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a few minutes. Okay, start off your income statement, in terms of like, where do I start? You're going to always want to start off by listing all the costs that you can think of. And again, I mentioned, don't be too concerned about variable costs versus SG&A. For right now, I would just be putting all your costs into that SG&A bucket. All right, but think of as many things as you can. Salaries, and I know you may not have any salaries now, but you might be planning to hire somebody down the road, or you might be planning to hire an accountant to do your books, like a bookkeeper. You might be planning to hire a marketing firm to do some basic marketing for you, all right? So think of as many things as you can. And then you're going to need to be thinking about, after you've developed your income statement, do you have any cash left at the end of year one? Now, I mentioned a minute ago that you may not have any revenue for year one, all right? So that's fine. But remember, you started with this assumption that you're going to have this $60,000 winnings from the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. So you need to look at that as money, as cash on hand. And then what are your expenses for year one? And do you have any money left at the end of year one? And if you don't, if you've run out of money, you need to kind of back up, look and say, how short am I, right? How much money do I need to make it to year one? And at that point, that's the minimum that you're going to need to be looking for above and beyond the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. All right. So that's telling you, I know I'm going to need to raise more cash from friends and family, or from angel investors, or from other competitions, or from other accelerator programs. And these are all things that we can, point you to and share with you as opportunities to raise funding for your business, or from bank loans, right? If you go out and get out a personal loan for your business, okay, to help fund your business. But that's the minimum you're going to need. And chances are you're going to need way more than that. And that's why you do projections for year two and year three, because you need to see how much cash you're going to need to get you to the point where you're generating enough revenue and breaking even on a month-to-month basis. That shortfall period of where you don't have cash, but I am going to break even, that's what you need to have funding for to carry you through that low period. All right. And then, as I mentioned, knowing where you're going to break even, is that in year two? Is that in year three? That's going to determine what that runway is and how much cash that you're ultimately going to need to be asking for. So, for example, I'll jump ahead a second. For example, people have come into the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, and I've seen teams say, I'm hoping to raise $300,000. Okay. Now they know the Be Your Own Boss Bowl only has $60,000 for the grand prize. but they've already done their financial planning. They've already said, I'm going to need $300,000 to get to that point where I can stand on my own feet and keep my business going, right? And it's okay to put that out there because you're going to have a broad audience for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. And there are going to be influential alumni that watch that program or attend that event. And there are going to be angel investors that are paying attention to the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. They're always looking for hot new companies that they could invest in. And so you may be able to attract that kind of funding after the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. All right. Very good. So let me stop there for a second. Any questions so far on any of the concepts I've gone over? Nothing? Okay, I'm going to keep going then. All right, so this is an example of, again, an income statement just by quarter for a given year. All right. You know, variable cost lines, again, are the things related to your cost of goods sold, things that are directly related to how much you sold in a given period. So for example, if you're planning to have salespeople and you're going to pay them a sales commission, all right, if they don't sell anything or if the business in general isn't going to sell anything, then you shouldn't be paying much in the way of sales commissions, all right? And most salespeople are paid on a commission basis. Some of them it's blended, a combination of a base salary plus a commission override, all right? But a sales commission is variable, just like the parts that it takes to build a product or the labor that it takes to put that product together, right? You know, when you're looking at SG&A, the largest expense is typically related to people, human capital, all right, in terms of either employees or consultants that you might be hiring in, any benefits related to those people. Two guidelines to use here, if you do think that you're going to be hiring people and putting them onto your payroll, is you can use 1.1 for salaries without benefits and 1.25 for salaries with benefits. All right, and you might ask, well, why 1.1 if they don't have benefits? It's because you still will have to be paying some taxes, as in like Social Security tax, okay, on their behalf. All right, so you still need to include some minor markup as part of your expense. All right. Okay. Now, for diving into year one, all right, there's a lot of elements, right? Again, I always say start off with what all your costs will be, and make sure you can estimate what those costs are going to be. Assume that you're going to win the Be Your Own Boss Bowl grand prize. All right. If you're not selling in year one, you don't have to worry about cost of goods sold. All right, because you haven't sold anything yet, or you don't have any variable costs yet. For SG&A, as I mentioned, they're usually the biggest piece of the pie. You want to think it all through. So a lot of people approach this and they'll go right to the revenue line and they focus on their revenues. And I would say start on the costs and think about what's your plan, all right? How are you planning to reach your prospective customers? Well, that would determine your advertising approach, and that will drive your advertising costs. It'll determine the marketing campaigns you want to have and what those related costs may be. And then as you think about the impact those programs have, then you can start taking a look at, well, how many people am I going to reach with these campaigns? What percentage of those people are going to convert into actual customers? How many of those customers are going to buy something? What would that average purchase look like? Okay. If it's a product, are they going to buy one? Or are they going to buy multiples? Or are they going to buy one, but they're going to buy it 3 or 4 times a year? So you need to think of what that buying pattern looks like. And so ultimately, you will document all your expected costs, move up to the revenue line start projecting what you think you can do driving revenue based off of the program you've got in place for marketing, advertising, sales. And that's going to then start showing you the expected income, the revenue coming in, all right? And that revenue coming in, now you can start looking to see, am I in balance or out of balance? And for year one, we expect, the judges expect, that you're going to be out of balance and that you're not going to make money. It's rare that I see teams who are proposing their year one financials where they're making a profit. Now, every business is different. Some businesses, their business model is set up that they actually can start turning a profit by the end of year one. But others, it's going to take into year two, and others even into year three. I will caution you that unless you're proposing a business in med tech or pharmaceuticals, or something with some really new cutting edge technology, people are going to want to see that you're going to be turning the corner and that you've reached break even, that break even point, and that you are going to be making a profit on a consistent basis before the end of year three. All right, that's about as long as most investors will go. That's about their tolerance level. So if you show that at the end of year three, you're still losing $100,000 a month, that's not a pretty picture. You might have to show a year four projection to show that that's where you break even and that you're turning the corner. And then you might even have to show a year five projection that shows that after you've turned that corner, your profit is going to skyrocket. Okay, but that has to have a particular story around it. And again, it depends on the type of business. All right, the tolerance to go longer without hitting break even, that tolerance drops off pretty quickly about the middle of year two into year three. So just a caution there. Okay, in terms of looking at year two and year three expenses, well, year two starts off, okay, that whatever your net income was from year one, okay, hopefully you're going to be able to carry that over, okay, if you ended year one with a profit, and that you're going to then use that as your starting point going into year two. Right? Year three, same thing. You're going to look at where you ended in year two. All right, whatever you think you have in terms of the way of cash at the end of year two, and that's going to carry over. And then you're going to be looking at, will that carry you into year three? All right. Now, you don't need to worry about taxes as long as you're not making money. As soon as you start showing that you're going to be making a profit in any given month, you now have to start budgeting that you will be paying taxes on that profit. All right. And that's just to be safe. If you're month to month making money, losing money, making money, losing money, that's all going to net out. And in the end, it's at the end of the year, did you make money or lose money? And that's ultimately going to determine whether or not you will pay taxes as a business. But a good conservative accounting practice is that whatever month you start making a profit, you budget for that profit by showing taxes and holding those taxes in reserve. Even if in subsequent months you're going to lose that money, or not lose that money. Even if in subsequent months you're going to not make a profit, and therefore it reverses that, most people will still keep that as an accrued expense on their income statement, just to be safe. All right, and then again, when you do this 3-year P&L, a P&L is not a cash flow statement, but it can be used for a similar purpose, and it should be a good general guide to be able to tell you when you're going to need to go out and get additional funding on your business, and even possibly how much funding you're going to need to get. All right, in terms of revenue, part of your assumptions should be, what are your pricing assumptions? And do your prices change depending upon your channel to market? So are you selling clothing, and are you selling through wholesale to, for example, boutiques, but also selling online? Because you may have an end price to a customer, but if you're selling it to a boutique, you're going to have to sell it at a wholesale price. And so you need to document in your assumptions what those two different pricing models might look like. All right. You also might want to add in there whatever your market share assumptions might be. All right. I would not project that you're going to come into a market as a new player, a new competitor, and you're going to take 50% market share in year one. That's pretty aggressive. And unless you've got a really good story as to why that's going to happen and how you're going to make that happen, and that you can build confidence with an investor that this is not a big risk, that this is a sure thing because you got the team and the plan to execute, that's a big wish. Okay, that's asking an investor to really take a chance. So you want to make sure you're realistic in what you're proposing. Okay. Again, I've already talked about variable costs. This is just some examples of what some variable costs might be depending upon the kind of business that you're in. And then SG&A, again, only add resources as you need them. So if you think you're going to need 3 people by the end of the year, you might need to hire somebody in March, and then you might not need to hire somebody else until August. And that third person, maybe you can even hold them off and not hire them until January. Well, that will help make your financials look better for that year, rather than just saying, I'm going to hire 2 people this year, and you put them into January, and now you have that expense for those 2 people for the whole year, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. All right. And again, investors are going to be looking for you to achieve profitability somewhere in year 2 or in year 3. All right, depending upon the kind of business, how much cash you need up front, things like that. So just a general sanity check, kind of step back after you've prepared your P&L. You're going to want to make sure that it ties to your business strategy. And, as I said, your numbers have to be realistic and attainable. The assumptions need to help tell the story of what's behind those numbers. All right. One tip I will give you is you should never say in your executive summary, or you should never say in your pitch presentation, here are my financial projections. Conservatively, we feel we can hit these numbers. No, you should always be showing an aggressive set of numbers. You should always be showing numbers that you say, we're confident we can meet these, but not, we're sure we can meet these because these are very conservative to what we've budgeted. It's the wrong approach to take. Investors never believe that. All right, so be conservative. I'm sorry, be aggressive. Sorry. Whew. Okay, and then also the revenue projections that you're showing need to tie in as a way of demonstrating that you are penetrating the market, that you are building some market share, and they need to tie back to how big you said that market was. So remember, part of your pitch presentation is saying, hey, our total addressable market is this big, our serviceable market's a little smaller, and then the actual market that we plan to go after is this market, right? This is the market we think we can achieve. Your numbers need to really tie into that, and they need to be believable in that way. All right, gross margins need to be in line within an industry. A sure sign to an investor that you're blowing smoke, right? That you aren't really on top of your game is when you claim that you can achieve a gross margin that is completely out of line with the industry standard. And for almost all industries, you can do some simple research to find out what are the margins that are typical in these various types of industries. So do your homework. find out what those benchmark numbers look like in your industry. And then when you do your financial projection, you want to look at how close are you coming in your numbers to the numbers that are represented by the industry in general. Now, it's okay to say, hey, my margins are going to be 10% better because, and then have a good story behind that. But if gross margins in your industry are 40%, and you're showing that your gross margins are going to be 60%, right? That's 30% better than what the industry's doing. You better be having a good, strong story to back that up, because they will absolutely zero in on that really quick. All right. And then again, at the end of your presentation, right, going back to what that PowerPoint presentation looks like, you're going to be making an ask. You're going to be saying, in addition to my Be Your Own Boss Bowl funding, I'm looking to raise $125,000 to carry my business through till we reach profitability, blah, 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 right? So your ask has to tie in with the financials that you're going to be showing. All right. So you should be thinking about that. You should be padding it a little bit. Like if your financials say you need exactly $100,000 in cash, you shouldn't be asking for exactly 100,000. You also shouldn't be asking for 300,000. All right, because you don't need that much. And investors will say, well, why do you want that much if you obviously don't need it? That shows you don't have a good grasp of what it's going to take to really run your business. All right.
I had a question. So
yeah, go ahead.
For the ask, should we be putting in like something for what we're expecting for the equity, or should it just be like how much we're trying to get?
So in your income statement projection, right, you don't put in, oh, I need 50,000 here, and then I'm going to need another 100,000 here. Don't do that. Okay, because you don't have a line on the income statement that says, investment income. Okay, and why you shouldn't even say investment income, but incoming equity. All right, you don't have an equity line on the income statement.
Okay,
right?
So what I mean, because maybe I don't have my words quite right because I'm still learning. But so when we make our ask and we're like, I'm asking for, say, $10,000. Should we also say like I'm offering, 15% of my company or something like that?
This is not Shark Tank. Okay, it's kind of like Shark Tank, but it's not Shark Tank. Okay, so this is not, I'm looking for $400,000 for a 10% equity stake in my company. No. Good question though, but no,
Yeah,
don't do that.
I was thinking Shark Tank.
Yeah, that's actually a good question, because if you said that, that would also be kind of a telling tale that maybe you're not on top of this. All right. There will be a time and place where you will want to make that kind of an ask, but that's down the road a ways. You have time for that. Any other questions before I go on? All right, so I've already said, consider your costs to start. You've got to really document assumptions. And I'm going to actually pull up a spreadsheet, actually two spreadsheets as other examples that I want to show you that I think will give you a better feel for this. Okay, on your financial, so the assumptions that you're going to use to build your forecast, all right, they have to be consistent with what you're saying in your plan. And when I say your plan, I mean in your executive summary and in your pitch deck, all right? You can't, and I know this sounds silly, but I've seen people make assumptions, build them into their financial plan, and then say something completely different in their executive summary because they forgot that they had changed their plan at the last minute, okay? And they documented it one place, but never carried it through in the plan. All three of these things have to be consistent. So the executive summary, what you say in the pitch deck, And these numbers and the assumptions behind these numbers all have to play and have to be in concert. They have to be consistent, okay? And then the projections that you're showing, okay, also should be driven from those assumptions. So they should be consistent. Please don't stress, and back maybe to Matthew's earlier question, don't stress about being highly precise. These are all estimates. Everybody knows that. They're your best guess. They're your best guess based off of your assumptions. They just have to make sense. All right, so I'll give you an example. If you say you're going to go from having 1 employee, but then the next quarter you're going to hire 10 employees, that's a big jump. How are you going to do that? Are you even set up to be able to hire 10 people? Are you going to have the revenue or the funding to be paying the salaries for those 10 people? Have you built the salaries for those 10 people into your financial plan? Now, let's go look at next quarter. If next quarter it says you're going to hire another 20, that's huge growth. That's not believable. All right. Most companies aren't going to say, I'm going to go from 1 to 10 to 20 employees in a 3-month period. That's not to say that that might not be what you want to do, and that might be the best plan for you. But if you're going to do that, you need a strong set of assumptions that are going to demonstrate why you're doing it and that you can do it, that you have a plan to do it, because it's a lot harder to hire people than you might think. All right. So your estimates, they're all estimates. They're your best guesses. That's okay. Just make sure they make sense. All right. And then nobody expects the numbers to be 100% accurate. You can estimate expenses. You can estimate what rent might be. All you need to do is, call 1 or 2 realtors, get them to give you a quote on a particular location that caught your eye. That's good enough. Okay. If you've got a friend in the real estate business that can quote that for you, that's good enough. All right. It's easy enough to estimate what your costs are for internet costs or what a computer is going to cost you. Nobody's going to care if you're projecting, I need to buy 3 computers and they're $1,000 a piece. Nobody's going to say, whoa, there should be $1,100 a piece. That's small potatoes. Nobody cares about that. Okay. And the other thing, as I mentioned before, is don't be starting from, oh, these are really ultra conservative numbers. We're sure we can hit these numbers. Some people think that's the best place to come from because it shows confidence, and investors don't believe that. Okay, they're going to immediately discount your projections no matter what you say. So be more aggressive. Don't be outrageously aggressive, but be more aggressive, because they're going to cut your numbers back a little bit anyway. All right. So let me talk a little bit now about what's going to go in your pitch deck as part of your investor pitch. So you're going to need to have a financial slide, and a financial slide is going to look something like this. All right. It's going to be 3 to 4 years, okay, of projections. Notice that these are summarized. So even though your spreadsheet had year 1 broken out into 12 months, we don't want to see that on a slide. We only want to know what's year 1 look like, year 2 look like, year 3 look like. Now, the reason I showed it this way is because in this particular case, year 1 was, oh, I launched my business last year. I had some revenue from last year. So I'm going to want to capture that. So in this case, I might show 1 year of history and 3-year projection. But if you don't have a year's history, or you don't have any revenue to report or any expenses to report, then you don't really need to show that past year. But if you did incur costs, if you did take in revenue, then you do want to show that past year plus your 3-year projection. All right. Okay. There's a thing in here called a driver, a line in here for drivers, if you see that. Okay, so include a revenue driver if it makes sense. I'll talk about that in a minute. All right. Don't make the mistake of showing your numbers, showing very big numbers on your slides, okay? You want to round your numbers. So round to the nearest thousand or the nearest tens of thousand or even to the nearest million if need be, all right? And you can easily denote that in the slide. Notice up here, we put thousands of dollars, okay? So that it's obvious then when somebody looks at this that 2022 revenues is $7 million, okay? It's 7,016 plus 3 zeros. So that's $7 million. I would even argue that things like showing a revenue number in 2023, this 17,299,000, just putting that number in kind of tells somebody that, well, there's a level of preciseness there. You could have easily have just rounded that to 17,300,000, right? So don't get hung up on the preciseness of numbers. And then no decimal points. So for example, here, this 277,000.6, so that's really $277,600. There's no need for that. You could have just said 277,000, period, and be done with it. All right, so there's a couple tips on how you're going to show this on your slide, okay? And then some people say, oh, well, I have this financial modeling package and it generates these graphs, and I want to show my graph because look at this curve. No, don't do that, all right? I know it looks pretty, but that's not what investors like to see. They actually like to see the numbers, okay? So we strongly suggest you use a table format similar to this. Doesn't have to look exactly like this, but that's what they prefer. And, you know, Lindsay sits in every MADV presentation for how many years? And, you know, every once in a while, you'll see somebody will show their graphs with financials, and you can see people's faces. The investors just kind of cringe because they don't want to see the graphs. They want to see the numbers. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about drivers. So what do I mean by drivers? Okay. Drivers are the things that are driving your revenue. Okay. So if you were selling backpacks, it would be customers. Okay, or it would be units. How many units sold? All right. So if I was in the backpack business, it would be backpacks. It could be anything. It could be widgets, which is kind of a generic term for any type of product that you manufacture. So that's what this line is indicating in here is that, you know, I'm going to sell 100 of these in 2021, 1,000 in 2022, 3,200 in 2023. Now, that's showing me the growth of the units, which then helps to explain the growth of this revenue. And so the reason you add a line for drivers is to help you better explain the growth of revenue. Now, in this particular case, sorry, Mike, keep screwing that up. So in this particular case, the driver here is revenue is based off of subscriptions, okay? So how many subscriptions sold, okay? Now, you're gonna need to figure out, well, how do I know how many subscriptions am I selling? Well, that would be based off of some assumptions. So the assumptions being, well, how many people can you reach based off of your demographic, the geography, the channel that you're using to get to those people. So that's the number of people, but that's not the number of subscribers. Then you'd have to have another assumption of, if I can reach this many people with my story, my product, my solution, the benefits that I'm going to offer them, how many of them are going to want to convert and actually become a subscriber? So that's that conversion percentage. So you're going to have an assumption that says, for the first quarter, my conversion percentage might be 5%. In the second quarter, I'm going to bump that up to 7%. Third quarter, it might be 10%. This is what you're using to help build your revenue model, all right? And then ultimately, taking the number of people you can reach by and factoring it by what your conversion percentage is, that's going to tell you how many subscribers per month that you would have. That's the number that now becomes your driver. That's the number that's actually tied directly to the revenue. All right. So all part of the little financial modeling that goes on behind the scenes, okay, behind the income statement. All right. Now, you could go a step further and say, and get more sophisticated and say, well, I also know that not every subscriber that signs up is going to stay with me forever, right? There's a certain churn. There's a certain amount of people that they'll sign up for something, they'll use it for 6 months, and they say, yeah, that was good, but that's not worth it to me anymore. I tried it, it was fine, but it's not worth it. And then they drop it. So there's a certain churn factor. So that's something else that you'd want to build in as an assumption into your model. And so you're going to have converting people in your channel to subscribers, but then you're also going to have a factor of churn of how many people drop out of your drop out of your subscriptions every month. Ultimately, that's the number that determines your total subscriptions per month. All right. And in its simplest form, what you put on your financial slide for the pitch is going to be your drivers, well, the years, your drivers, the revenue, the expenses, and then your EBITDA or your gross profit, I'm sorry, your net profit, okay? So they're the things that you're going to want to show. That's at the highest level. Notice I didn't get into any of my other revenue breakdown products and services. I didn't get into my expenses, direct and indirect expenses. I didn't get into breaking out salaries, or you don't need to do that on the slide that goes into your pitch deck. Okay, so some other things that you should be ready to think about, or that you should think about as you're putting together your financial projections. If you were to pitch to a live investor, okay, or to the judges, one of the questions they may ask is, so you've asked for $150,000. If we were to double that, what impact would that have on your business? Could you scale your business faster? Could you become more profitable sooner? And you need to know the answers to those questions. So it's a good thing, after having done your financial projection, to step back and ask that question. Do a little what if game and say, if I was to get double the amount of money I asked for, what would I do with it? Where would I spend it? It's one of the few times that you can kind of let yourself go and be thoroughly, totally optimistic and get excited about what could happen with your business if you were to get that kind of funding. All right. Another question that you're going to want to be able to answer is, so at what point do you break even? Now, you could look at this slide and say, oh, I break even in 2022. Okay, when? 2022 is 12 months long. And there's a big difference between breaking even in January or breaking even in December. So you're going to want to know that answer. And then, you know, you are expected to lose money in year one, okay, in most cases, all right? But are you going to break even in year 2 or in year 3 or even in some cases after year 3? I hope not, but that could be, all right? All right, so this is what a clean slide might look like for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl pitch, okay? If you were to put that into your pitch deck. But I want to ask you, what's wrong with this slide? Are there things that you would change on this slide? And what are they?
I would increase the font size for the numbers.
Okay, that's a good one.
I would also probably make it so that the lines were a little bit easier to read and it was a little bit more divided up, and, you know, have some nice colors or something.
Okay, yeah, you could change the colors, right?
I'm wondering, why are they showing number of employees? And it, and it seems like they're growing exponentially really fast.
Right. So that's a really good point. So a couple of things. One is this company reversed when they presented their financials, they reversed. Notice that I said usually you start with your revenue and then costs. So they have it flipped around, costs and then revenue, right? So it's not really a standard format that they're showing this in, because you normally say I have this much revenue minus these costs gives me my profit. So it's confusing to an investor because it's not laid out the way an investor would expect to see it. So that's one thing. To your point about employees, here they're actually showing two lines that are the drivers. And the reason is because this is a product that would be sold to companies where their employees would be the users. And the pricing model that they're using is based off of the number of users of software. So they're actually showing, and this is not a bad thing, I think this is a good thing. In terms of the drivers, they're saying, hey, we're expecting year one to land 2 customers. We're going to go out and find 2 companies. And we expect that those 2 companies are going to have 1,000 people in each company, right? You could kind of just draw that conclusion that that's the average. And then in year 2019, we're going to grow, we're going to hit 10 companies. So that's a pretty significant growth, right? 10 times growth is pretty good. And they're going to still go after the same size companies, right? Roughly 1,000 employees per company. All right. Now notice what happens in year 3. So once again, significant growth. They're going to grow over 300% in terms of the number of companies. But notice that the growth isn't consistent in employees. So now they must be starting to bring on smaller companies, because if you did the same math, right, that 75 companies, if everything was linear, would generate 75,000 employees, which is what that revenue is based off of, okay? And then again, in year 2021, now they're doubling, all right? So now notice that growth curve is flattening out. It spiked up really high, and now it's starting to level off in terms of the companies that they're bringing on board. Notice the growth in employees also has leveled off because they're still not bringing in that same 1,000 average employees per company, all right? So in this case, it's actually really good that they're showing those 2 driver lines. But there's another thing I don't like about this slide. Anybody else have any thoughts?
The numbers there's too many numbers. You need to round them off more.
Exactly. They could have easily done that same thing of putting, $K or 3 zeros, $sign and 3 zeros. And then they could have just cut 3 digits off of all of the dollars on that slide, right? And it just makes it easier to read. And people will digest that pretty quickly. Believe me, they're used to seeing slides like this. So you want to make them as quick and easy for them to read as possible. Now, another thing that you can do let me go back a second. Another thing you can do with your slides in here is if there's a particular thing you want to highlight, like if you want to show that your gross margins are going to jump from year 2 to year 3, and you have a particular story to say about that, you can put notes down here in the bottom. So like they could have put a footnote down here. Oops, sorry. They could have put a footnote down here. Or they could have had a line that just said gross margin for 2019, gross margin for 2020. And they might want to show that and then talk to, well, why is that happening? And it may be because we're going to secure a deal. We've identified a partner. We plan to be in production with our partner. And when we do that, our gross margins are going to double because our manufacturing costs with our partner are going to be 1/3 of what they are today. That's a big statement. Like that's important for an investor to know. And so that might be something that you might want to add to this slide as a data point and then talk to that. Okay, because that's significant. All right, so so let's talk a little bit about, what can a P&L tell an investor? All right, so again, one of the things I talked about is they're going to be looking at what's the burn rate. All right, now in this particular case, we're showing, on a monthly basis and the quarter. All right, so if you were an investor, what conclusion you would draw as the burn rate for this quarter? Let's see how many people were able to follow along this workshop. What's the burn rate? Anybody want to be brave and take a stab at it?
Is it 2,000?
Well, I don't know. Why do you say 2,000? Tell me your reasoning.
Burn rate sounds like how much money you're spending for the quarter. And then you have the EBITDA there where you made 500 and you spent 500 and you spent 2,000. So like I could say you spent 2,000.
Well, so burn rate in this case is we're looking at, so how much are you losing? How much cash are you losing or using? How much cash are you using?
Oh, okay.
All right. So you lost $1,000 in the first month, 500 in the second month, and you made 500 in the third month, right? Overall for the quarter, you've lost $1,000. So from an investor's perspective, you've burned through $1,000 in cash that you didn't have.
Oh, okay. I misread the chart.
That's okay.
I thought total was another month and then I was adding those up.
Yeah, no, that's okay. All right. So other things are, if we started this with $5,000 in the bank, okay, then what would you say your runway is? If you had $5,000 in the beginning of the bank and you saw this kind of burn rate, how long is your runway? And I've talked about that concept of runway.
Would that be 5 quarters?
Yeah. If you're burning $1,000 a quarter and if things don't change, right, and you started with $5,000 to begin with, you're only going to go 5 quarters and then you're out of business, completely out of business. All right. And then if you were to look at this from the perspective of an investor, what's your growth rate, your revenue growth rate from January to March? Patrick, are you saying 2,000?
Yeah.
Is that 2,000%?
No, $2,000.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. So growth rates are typically expressed in a percentage basis. So what's the growth rate? In real terms, yes, it's $2,000 more, but what's the growth rate?
Be 3 times?
Yeah, it would be a 300%. Okay, because 3,000 is 3 times what the 1,000 is. So investors look for things like that. They're looking for how fast are you growing? Is it realistic? Do you have a plan behind it that justifies it, that backs it up? They're looking for what's your burn rate? How long will your cash last you? When will you need more cash? Because they're looking at, do you have a plan that will get you to the point where you'll be able to generate enough cash on your own? All right, things like that. All right, so we're just about done here. The last thing is this use of funds concept. You know, like I said, you're going to be at the end of your pitch. Most of you, not all, but most of you are going to be looking to ask for funding, right, for your business. And you could be asking in terms of quantitative things or qualitative things. So quantitative is, you know, you need $50,000 to do software development. I need $20,000 to expand my hosting capability. I'm going to need, you know, $16,000 in office equipment and supplies. I'm going to need $100,000 to cover my salaries or my consulting expense for legal and accounting fees, things like that. Okay, so you can quantify them. They're very specific. Other things are more qualitative. Okay, so I'm going to need $10,000 to penetrate a new market segment. I'm going to need X dollars to add additional resources, okay, hiring, or to bring on new channel partners, or for a new marketing approach or a new marketing campaign or advertising approach, okay, or to do even market research, okay? So think about how you're planning to use that money. And again, when you ask for it, you say, I'm looking for $125,000, leave out the equity part, Matthew, but just I'm looking for $125,000 and here's how I plan to use it. And pick 4 or 5 categories and just limit it to that, or even 2 or 3 categories and limit it to that. Don't get too detailed in terms of what that's going to be. All right, I've already talked about most of these summary things, so I'm not going to go over them again. Listen, we only have 5 weeks to go before the submission deadline for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, so please take advantage of the resources we have. There's 1 workshop next week yet to finish up. Continue to do your research on the industry, customers, competitors, other similar business models, even if they're in different industries. Whoops. And also, for those of you who are looking ahead at what an exit strategy might be, you want to look at other similar exits out there, do your research on that. You want to start thinking about, have you validated your problem, your solution? Have you validated how desirable your solution is? Have you tested that with your customers? Okay, and how viable is your business in terms of your business model and looking at your financials? Can this business survive? Because, you know, these all have to be for-profit businesses in the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. All right, and then put yourself out there and get feedback. Talk to mentors. You can book appointments with me. Talk to your prospective customers and users and other people within the industry. There's a lot of money on the line here, folks. $200,000 in cash and prizes. And we have another big award that we'll be announcing shortly, potentially another $10,000 award that'll be going to a Be Your Own Boss Bowl participant. So, and that's on top of this. So we're working hard to make this a very lucrative competition, and we want you to do your absolute best. A lot of these prizes are all sponsored by some of our great sponsors like Tech Mansion. So I want you to make sure that you're aware of that and that you know what you're going after here.